Well, welcome to our living room. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm trying something different here. See if I can see a few folks. Everybody, I got a couple of thumbs up. Okay, I'll just take that as a yes. I'm in my living room and I was talking about how to speak from on a computer. I've never done this before, so this is kind of exciting. And my wife had some great advice. She said, well, just pretend they're in the living room with you and just talk with them. So that's what we're going to do this morning. And the topic I'm interested in discussing this morning is the benefits or the beauty of a crisis situation, and more important, the necessity to not waste it. I was listening to Greg Groeschel over the week a couple of times in preparation for a leadership in crisis podcast I'm doing with Tim Hugenboom, and I heard him say this line of never waste a good crisis. And his reference was to business and decisions that need to get made as leaders, and sometimes we put up with things that they're just not that important, they're not that urgent. But then a crisis comes along and, well, they all of a sudden become really important. Whether it's, a little bit overstaffed, or a department that's not making the required funds or revenue, or expenses out of line, or unnecessary expenses, or whatever it is in business. Those are the times when crisis comes. Those are the times when we get to deal with those. And it's a great opportunity. And so his recommendation was never waste a good crisis. And in light of that, I began to think about all the times that we read about crisis in the Bible, and some of the lessons that was learned and written about, the lessons we can glean from that. I think one of the first places I want to start, I'm just going to draw your attention to, is Hebrews chapter 11. If you read through all the great heroes of faith, you can quickly see the amazing amount of faith that was built through crisis. The list is endless, and you can read it there, from Moses and all the judges to even Stephen in the end, and Paul. They're not written in there, but the lessons that they teach us about are amazing. So I want to start today in 1 Samuel 18. It talks about David and Jonathan, and the principle or the point that we want to look at is in a crisis, the necessity to find a battle buddy. That's the military term for it, is to find a battle buddy. The purpose of a buddy like that is actually quite a few. It helps to keep us accountable. It helps to ensure that in the heat of the moment, you're not left behind. And the list goes on. We're going to talk about a few of them. But first of all, 1 Samuel 18, just look at the first, I think it's the first verse. Jim Bell, do you have that handy? Can we unmute Jim so he can read that for us? I'm not sure if it's possible.
How
There
many
he is.
verses?
Verse 1 to what?
Just the first verse, I believe.
First verse, okay. And it came to pass, when he had made the end of speaking unto Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim. Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's okay.
If you want to remute it, then we don't get an echo. So it happened at the time in David's life, where crisis was kind of starting to brew, and that friendship between Jonathan and David held him over for many years to come. It saved David's life. It provided necessary information when David was in dire danger from King Saul. And the interesting thing is, and David had other people around him, but the interesting thing is sometimes the friend or the battle buddy that you need with you isn't the same in battle that it is in training. Sometimes the peacetime friend is just that. They're great for the time of peace, but when you get into the battle, you need to find somebody else to go with you. But it's important that no matter what stage of life or battle or crisis that you're in, that you have somebody that is on your side, that's in your corner, that you've given the permission to speak clearly to. The King James version is they were like one soul. They were very close that way. And I wonder if you have a person like that. And if you do, are they there for you in crisis of battle and in peace? And if you actually rely on them. One of the great another benefit is that it improves communication. It can clarify things. When we hear things a certain way, in the middle of a storm, we can interpret things a certain way, or in the middle of a battle, we can interpret things a certain way. And then we go and we bounce it off the person that's with us, and they say, "That's not what I heard. I heard it this way." And you can clarify direction and you can clarify communication by having somebody else to balance it. And then it gives us a companion to confide in. This is nothing more dreadful than going through a stressful time, a crisis, being alone, not having somebody to talk with, whether it's your wife or your husband or a friend. It's important. It's important that as we continue through a crisis, because we've been in it for a while. It's been months going on now, and we're all feeling the effects in different ways. But I hope that we can use this crisis, if we don't have a friend, if we don't have somebody close, that we can seek them out and indeed become a battle buddy, if you want to use that term, or a friend to somebody, or encourage them to join with us. But I encourage you, use this time, whatever your crisis is, whether it's in business or at home or wherever you're at, to join with somebody. Link up and develop a friendship, a relationship that'll keep you. That's the first one. The second one we're going to look at is the importance of keeping the mission central. You keep the purpose of your existence, the purpose of what you're doing, front and center in whatever happens. You know, there's so many seemingly important things that happen around us, but in a time of crisis, we have to focus on one or two or maybe three things that will change the outcome, that will lead you in the right direction. I was looking through different leaders in the Bible, and I was reminded of Joseph. And you can pick up the story. I don't think we need to read it, but you can pick up the story in Genesis 39. I think it's 1 through 12, where Joseph had been dug out of the pit. He'd been sold into Egypt, and Potiphar's wife took a liking to him. I guess he was a handsome, strong young man that she hadn't seen before, and she was pretty keen on him, and she tried to get him to go to bed with her, and he wouldn't. And it sounds like it went on for a while. And one day he was in doing his work. I think is how the word that it used. He was in doing his business. He was doing what he was supposed to be doing, and out of somewhere, she caught hold of him and said, "Come now, let's get this done." And in total, I don't know if it was panic, but in total commitment to not going there, he let go of his coat that she had a hold of. He slipped out of it and ran. He took off. Because he knew that if he stayed there, if he knew that if he played around in that territory, he was going to be in danger. He was so committed to keeping the mission central that he was willing to leave behind his coat. Pretty important piece of clothing back then, but he left it behind. And I think if there's a sub point to this, it's that as you keep the mission central, there's some things that get left behind. John, no, Dr. Henry Cloud wrote a terrific book, and I think I've made reference to it before, about necessary endings. Things need to end. They need to end for a whole host of reasons. Sometimes to make room for new things to start. And sometimes things have to end just simply so you can keep your focus on the mission. Whatever the goal that you're facing right now, keep your eye on it. Don't be distracted by things that are around you. It's interesting that during the Civil War, General Grant, at the beginning of the war, he was known as Unconditional Surrender Grant. And it started because the Battle of Fort Donelson, a Confederate brigadier general, I guess it was, had tried to surrender and tried to negotiate terms. And General Grant said to him simply, no terms except an unconditional and immediate surrender can be accepted. That was the only terms he wanted. He said, that's the only way we're going to end this thing. And that was the beginning of the war, or relatively close to the beginning of the war, when he was given field command. But as time went on, he held on to it. That was his motto. Anybody that wanted to surrender to Grant knew that it was going to be unconditional surrender, until it came to the very last battle, the battle with General Lee. Because his goal, his mission, was to unify the nation. Him and Lincoln had already discussed the terms, and instead of unconditional surrender to Lee, Lee's men were given a very generous surrender term. They had to turn in their rifles. That was a given. Had to turn in their rifles, but they were able to keep their horses and their mules. They were fed, and they were allowed to return home immediately. There was no trials. There was no delays. And the change was so significant that some people thought he'd gotten soft. But really what he had done is he kept the mission alive. He realized that at the beginning, nothing but unconditional surrender. There was a long war ahead of him. Unconditional surrender was the only option. But as he drew to the close, as the last great battle was fought, it was quite a lengthy battle with Lee. And then he realized that this is it. Now, if they're going to unify the nation, the best thing they can do is generously accept his terms. So they did. And the nation was healed over a period of time, and the story goes on. But the importance of it is that he maintained his focus on the vision. The mission was to unify the nation, not just embarrass the South, to unify the nation. So keep your mission central. After finding somebody to go with you, keep the mission central. It's so important. Be willing to leave behind the stuff that you don't need, the stuff that might seem important, that's not central to the mission. It might be extraneous. Leave it behind, but focus on the mission, and we'll advance together, and we'll get our goals. That was number 2. The third one, and we're going to probably end on this one, but there's a couple lessons we can take from it. Second, since you're in my living room, John Stevens, do you want to read Matthew 8:23-25? When you have it, just put your thumb up or something, we'll get to you. But Jesus is in the boat, and the lesson is you got to be present. You got to show up. Your presence and my presence in the time of crisis or the time of need, whether it's my family or my work or the church or the group of friends that we have, there's no substitute for your presence. And I want to take that story, or take that idea, and we'll start in verse 23 of Matthew chapter 8. And we can unmute John when he's ready.
Okay, you hear me now? Yep. Oh, yep. Okay. And when he had entered into the ship, his disciples followed him. And behold, there arose a great tempest in the sea, insomuch that the ship was covered with water, and he was asleep. But he was asleep.
Carry on to 20. Was that 25?
But that was 24.
Yep. 25. Finish on 25.
And his disciples came to him and awoke him, saying, Lord, save us, we perish.
Quite a crisis. Thanks, John. Indeed, they knew that they were in a pickle. They had entered the boat. They were crossing the pond, whatever the lake was, and they realized that in the middle of it, they were in quite a predicament. But their help that they needed was there in the boat. And I thought about the times and the people, the great leaders that have shown up and were present when needed. One of our local people, leaders, that is so present is actually the president of our school. Yeah, is the principal of our school, Gary Jones. You look at the work he does on this, and he has done on the school. Boy, if he hasn't shown up to lead that school, what an example of somebody that is present and shows up, and with their presence leads. Another hero of mine is Ernest Shackleton, the Antarctic explorer. Terrific man, terrific adversity in his last Antarctic exploration. Their boat got stuck in the ice for, I think it was 495 days before their men were all back on land again. 2 years it was before they all got returned safely back to civilization. And through it all, he would be as interested in each person's health as anybody else. He was known to be delivering tea and food to people that were sick on his crew. And he was very present with everybody that was there through all their heartaches and their abandoning of the ship and their trials of days and days on the water with life rafts, trying to find help, and then in turn returning to rescue the rest of his crew. Quite a man, and he was there. He showed up. Jesus, one of the greatest leaders of all time, the greatest leader of all times by a long mile, was in the boat with his disciples when they needed him. And so it's so important that then from that place of being present, he was able to speak to them, give them quite a lesson on the power of the Lord. Matthew 28 confirms it in a different way. He just says, quite frankly, I am with you always. If there's ever a leader that we wanted to hang out with, that would be him. A leader that's with us always is a leader we want to follow. So be present. After you find a person to be with, a friend to help you through this time, man, don't lose sight of the mission. Keep that mission central in your focus, and then be present. Be present to the people that you're with, to your friends. Stay connected, and then if you carry on in that story, verses 26 and 27, following up in chapter 8. Jesus' response to the men in the Bible, or in the men in the boat, said this. And he said to them, "Why are you so fearful, O ye of little faith?" And he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. But the men marveled, saying, "Oh, what manner of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey?" You know, it didn't come across. He didn't say, "Oh, you have no faith." He actually, you can look at it a little bit differently and say, you know what? He recognized that they had a little bit of faith, and he built on it. He recognized that there was fear there, and he called it out. And it's not a bad idea that if you're with somebody and you recognize that there's fear there, to just say, "Hey, this is what it is. There's times I'm terrified." Recognize for what it is, but don't react from fear. Use fear to motivate you. Accept the opportunity that becomes present. And that's the last point we're going to look at today, is accepting the opportunity. I always thought it was Winston Churchill that said this, but in looking at Franklin Roosevelt, it was in his 1933 inaugural address that he made the statement, "We have the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Then he followed it up by saying, we have no unsolvable problems if we act wisely and courageously. But it can never be helped if we just talk about it. We must act and act quickly. That was from his 1933 inaugural address. It was in the middle of the Great Depression. And he motivated the people by recognizing that there was a lot of things to fear at the time. But the greatest was just the fear itself. And then he motivated and he accepted the challenge that was there. And he looked at it, and with the people that were with him, he was able to move the country through the Great Depression. Take action is a great motto to paint on anywhere you look, whether it's a mirror or don't paint it on your wall unless it's pretty, but remind yourself to take action in the middle of a crisis. It's so easy to be motivated by fear into a stationary activity and doing nothing. But it's time when we step out and do something. I'm reminded of Revelation 7. I should read it as we close because it's such a testament. Revelation 7, verse 11, I think is where we're going to start. And he says this, and all the angels stood round about the throne and about the elders and four beasts that fell before the throne on their faces and worship, saying, Amen, blessings and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be unto our God forever and ever. And one of the elders answered, saying unto me, what are those things, or what are these which are arrayed in white robes? And where did they come from? And I said, Sir, you knowest. And he said to me, these are they which came out of great tribulation, and they have washed their robes. They have made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore are they before the throne of God, and serve him day and night in his temple. And he that sitteth on the throne shall dwell among them, and they shall hunger no more, neither thirst, neither shall the sun light on them, nor any heat. For the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall feed them, and shall lead them unto living fountains of water, and God shall wipe every tear from their eye. It's not a coincidence that these are the folks that came out of great crisis, came out of great tribulation, trouble, stress, trials. Some of you have been through trials that are unspeakable, and you're still here because you found people that you're willing to go with it through. You've kept your eye on the vision and on the mission. You've not let fear destroy your confidence. You've shown up and you were present. And there's people that are coming out of that and are willing to stay in the relationship with our Lord. And by doing so, we wash our robes, we make them white. And in the end, the great reward is that we get to spend it in eternity with Christ. And I don't think of a better ending to a crisis than that. There's a song that I want to play here. I think we can